Nellie, what's going on? Welcome to the Dad Edge podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I can't wait for this conversation today.
Me neither. I don't have very many women on this podcast, and it's not because I don't welcome women. I love the view of women and parenting experts who are female and all that. I think that there's a stereotype out there, or maybe a perception that, since this is Dad Edge, like it's just all men. But if you look at like my guests, like probably 95% of them are men. But the 5% are women actually usually have the highest amount of downloads. So it tells me that the audience, they like the guests, but they really value, the viewpoint, the perception and the message from our female guests as well. So before we get started here, just you and I were smiling, laughing because there's not many people, I think, in our worlds. But why don't you just share what your family looks like currently?
Yeah. So it's my husband and I. We've been together since the 1900s. So a long time.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I know you say that to our teenagers now. They're like, oh my gosh, that's so long ago. I was like, it was not that long ago. But anyway, so we've been together for about married 21 years now and together longer. But anyway, we have 4 daughters that are now 13, 15, 15, and 17. So we have twins in the middle there. And so all middle school, high school, all the fires, all the things happening all the time. We live on the East Coast of the United States.
Yeah. Whereabouts do you live?
We live in North Carolina, pretty much the very southern tip of coastal North Carolina.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. The 1900s. Yeah, it's funny because, I was born in the 1900s as well. And now I feel like when I'm talking to somebody like young and they're, not on their phone and, I'm talking outside this house, like, if I say when the year I was born, I'm lucky. Like my dad is 75, but he looks like he's 60, maybe in his late 50s. So we got good genetics. I'll be 40. I'm 47. And, but when I say 1975, they're like, wow, like that was even like the 3/4 of the 1900s,
right?
Not even like the late 1900s, right? So, let me ask you this. What has been your experience with responses to people when people are like, oh, so Nellie, how many kids do you have? And then you tell them the number. What do they say?
Oh, it's usually a gasp or a sigh or a cajoling, like, oh, wow. Yeah,
Wow.
that's a lot,
Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've gotten so used to it now that people are like, how many kids do you have? I was like 4. And I just say, wow, the same time they do. Cause I know it's coming. So when I say,
great.
I know they're like, how many kids do you have? I was like, I have 4. And we both go, wow. And then they're like, boys, girls. And I was like, 4 boys. And then I just changed the tone. They're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Cause that's usually what I get. I actually had one guy be like, what? Why? And it wasn't a wow, it was a why. He's like, sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that, but why?
That's so funny. I find it very fascinating because it seems like somehow if you have a mix of, girls and boys, then they're like, oh, okay. But if it's all one or all the other, the reaction is that much more intense. It's really interesting.
And I know one of your expertise of many is, well, 2 of your expertise of many is, how we successfully raise daughters, right? And you've got great experience there. So I want to make sure we serve the audience in that way. I always joke saying that like, hey guys, sorry, I don't have the firsthand experience with raising daughters. So I'll just bring on as many guests as I can to talk about this topic. But secondly, it's raising teens, and you and I were kind of joking back and forth of like, oh, just wait till they're teens and your life will go to shambles. And I don't want to spoil it for the audience, but I'll share with you and I didn't say this before we hit record, but my experience with raising teens has been the same as yours. I've actually thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I've actually have loved it. My 16 and 14-year-old, I love how they're like these young adults and we have these really cool conversations and we've got really great connection and we do different things than what I do with my 9 and 6-year-old. And I have absolutely enjoyed the heck out of it. So like all the warnings that I've heard in the past, I don't know if it's maybe doing this podcast and learning so many things before they were teenagers and implementing things, or maybe we just got lucky. I don't know. I don't really care, but I really enjoy it. But for you, was that experience the same for you?
Yeah. So, we went through infertility before we had kids. And so I always, kind of joke in a way, but I don't think it's a joke. I was a mom for about 2-3 years before I was a mom, because you're pouring your life, soul, and everything that you have into being a mother, even then. And, but when I had 4 girls in 4.5 years, especially, after I had twins. And then when the twins are like 13 months old, I'm like, hey, I'm pregnant. Everyone just like jaw drops. And why? What are you doing? And then we find out it's a girl, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so bad. Just handing me the Band-Aids and the gauze because I'm going to be beat up in 10 years, type of thing. And they were telling me, oh, you're going to be so stressed. It's going to be so hard. You're going to hate it, And I was just of such a mind, back then and still am today, that no, this is half of my childhood experience. My platform is called the 6570 Family Project, because that's how many days are in 18 years. And if I take away,
I was wondering that.
Yeah, 6570.
I was like, is that 4 digits of her zip code or what? I didn't know what
address,
that was.
No. Yeah. No, that's how many days are in 18 years. And so this is our project. I call parents architects, family architects, because we're planning, designing, and building the beginning of someone else's life, which is a huge responsibility and honor. And it humbles us in every way possible. And we have a timeline for that, right? Because they do become adults, and we go from this place of guidance and mentorship to more of a place of consulting, right? And they come to us. But while they're in the 6570, which is this parenthood, childhood dance that we're in, we have this invaluable time that is unlike any other time that we'll ever have with them. And its impact is so many times greater than any other time we'll have with them as well. So what you're doing now is going to affect them when they're, 18, 25, 65, whatever that is. And that I always say, that doesn't mean that you need to be perfect. In fact, please don't, because we don't want to teach perfectionism. Fall down, get up, apologize, and it's okay, and move on. But all that to say, yes, I have definitely had the same type of reactions whenever people, have seen that I have 4 girls, especially when they're coming in. They're all officially teenagers now, and my hair is not white, yet. And there are fires all the time. There's always something going on. There's always an emotional storm, always a mental storm. But I see the divergence. And I don't know if you can see this too with your kids. I can see the divergence when they're coming to me and they're like, oh, this is happening, or they're not coming to me. And I just see something percolating under their mind, under their facial expressions. And I'm like, I could go and say, this is really hard, I'm giving up, just figure it out, and let them, life of hard knocks, whatever, the school of life, they could figure it out. Or I could be really intentional, really supportive, and try and help them and guide them, through this with them, not for them, but with them. And that's the divergence right there that I've seen in my life.
So I love this. What have you seen as far as you've been working with clients and parenting for how long now?
I've been working with families for, a bit over 10 years now.
Okay.
In one capacity or another. It's my background is in psychology and biology, and I started my career in animals, actually, in marine mammalogy. And I worked with animals for a long time, and behavior work and reinforcements, positive reinforcements, all these things. And then we had a family event. It was a health event with my husband, and it really made us then change our own habits at home. And we did that for a few years. We got him to a place that he was much better. And it was a heart issue that he was having, but it's congenital. So we had to change everybody. I'm sorry, it's hereditary, it's congenital, but also hereditary. So we then had to change the habits and mindsets of everybody in the family. And so anyway, after a couple of years of doing that, I was really just, there's no other word to it, but called to then use what we had been using in our family and everything that I had learned and been doing for so long anyway, and apply it to the messy human world. And then I have I have 4 daughters. And then that just percolated and developed into me helping families with daughters, especially in the second half of childhood.
Wow. Okay. So out of all that experience, then a couple of questions really come to mind. What were you doing in your own family that you had to, I'm guessing, create in some way, shape, or form based on the situation that you had? And once you implemented it, it really seemed to work really, really well. And then my second question, and you can answer these in any order, is I'm really curious as to, I know with my guys in our community, I mean, we actually have hard data on it. Like, because when men come and join us in our mastermind, they have to identify, what has their attention. What do they truly want? More than anything, we give them 5 different choices. 80% of men say they want to create an extraordinary marriage with their wife. That's what's on front of mind, right? So I'm curious, when people come to you, what is on their front of mind? Like, what do you see most common?
Okay. Those are 2 very loaded questions. So
yes.
I'll answer the first one. Remind me of the second one. If I forget, then I go off on a tangent. So with the first one, of course, what we found, and it was just one of those things. We knew that this condition ran in his family before we had kids. So he was tested because we wanted to. Adoption was always an option on our plate, but the test came back negative back in the, I guess it was the 2000s. It wasn't the 1900s anymore. It was the 2000s at that point. But anyway, and it turned out to be wrong. 4 kids in, it turned out to be wrong. And he was in ICU all of a sudden. And so then I'm looking at my husband in ICU, trying to figure all of that out. And I turn around to these 4 little girls and I'm like, we don't want this to be your reality too. So there was, and let me also say in here, because I feel like it plays a big part of my story. My dad died when I was very young. I was only, he was in a really terrible accident when I was 9 months old, and he died when I was a year and a half. He was in a coma for a while. And so that was a big part of the story too, because I'm looking at these 4 little girls who were, 4 and under, and I have a husband in ICU. And again, I was like, no, I am not going through this. I am not having them lose their dad like I lost my dad, all of these things. And so it was just this determination. So what happened is, of course, we had to have health changes, right? So there's those habit changes that needed to happen. How do we look at what we eat? How do we look at food? It's not just tasty, it's actually nourishment. So there was all of those, physical changes. But we went through hospital visits and having to give, dad shots every day, and him falling asleep reading, Goodnight Moon after a page and a half because his heart was too weak. All of these things, we went through all of that as a family. And so communication, even when they were that young and that vulnerable and wide open, and a lot of people don't necessarily give kids the credit that they can have to go through something together, right? And to hear one another out, hear one another's fears out, hear one another's frustration, be able to have a moment when we're not being our best, but then come back and apologize for it and say, you know what? I'm really stressed right now. I didn't mean that. I'm so sorry. Let's get through this together. Right. And so it was that vulnerability. It was the vision and seeing what we wanted down the line and doing what we could today in order to make that happen. So all of these pieces started being put together within our family. The vision, our core beliefs, our impacts that we were having together, discipline, how we were teaching, how my husband and I were teaching them, how we wanted to live our lives right now instead of this, down the line, because you never know how long that line is. And so discipline and resilience that we were able to do, and the communication that we were allowed to have during that time, and how that developed all of us, even though they were so young at that time. And he ended up having surgery in 2010 and thankfully hasn't needed another one since then. But that's always a possibility. And we all know that, and we all live and appreciate and respect that as well.
Wow. So it's interesting, because I think a lot of us, what we do is we view our kids can't handle us being a human being.
Mm.
right? I know when even my boys ask me like, "Hey man, you doing okay?" Like, and they know. And if I've had an off day or an off moment, or I've had an interaction maybe with a client that didn't turn out the way I wanted, or got some bad news or whatever, right? The typical stresses that in my mind, for some reason, I shouldn't put that on them.
Mm.
And what I'm probably doing is teaching a couple bad lessons in that moment, which is when somebody asks you what's wrong or something's really wrong, keep it to yourself, right? Because that's what I'm doing to them.
Right.
I'm also robbing them of the opportunity to use their empathy muscles, right? And to create space for somebody and to create dialogue, right? And ask more questions if they need to, right? Instead of just shielding them from that. So I love that you hit on that.
Mm.
And I think if families did more of that, we would probably be in a much better place if we just had this more open communication and dialogue, right? So I appreciate that answer. But yeah, the second question was really around, what do parents come to you most commonly for?
Mm. Yeah. So it's a multitude of different reasons, but I will say a lot of it is there's a wall. There's a wall, and it's being built for a while. And, at first it was just, okay, that's that quote unquote teenage behavior for a long time. And I would say even now, we don't use the word teenager in my house to address my kids like, oh, you're a teenage, right? They go to teen things because that's what they're called outside of our home, but we don't call them teenagers because they're young adults. And the word teenager comes with all of this acceptance of negativity and irresponsibility and just passivity, right? And so we don't even use that in our house. And I see that with people that come to us like, oh, well, they're just the, typical teenager. It's such a term that we hear all the time, right? Oh, yeah, they're just doing those typical teenage things. They, ran away or they're sneaking out of the house at night, or, they're doing drugs or alcohol. Or they're having such body shame issues, or, and I always say I want to unsubscribe to normal, right? Because first of all, I don't believe in normal. Normal's just the average of everybody's abnormality, which we all are because we're all individuals. But this idea of normal is a cultural shifting sand that is always moving. And right now, I am not a fan of what normal is out there today. And so I am hopping off that band. I hopped off that bandwagon a long time ago, and I brought my family with me. And we're like, no, we can watch culture. We can see it. We can discuss it. We can, but we are not going to be of culture, right? There's this herd mentality that is all these, droning on, this herd of, I don't pick your animal, whatever, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can break out of that. And that's always a choice that we have. And so when these parents are coming with these, either they're in this quote unquote typical teenage behavior, or their daughter is 7, 8, 9, 10, and they're like, I see that down the road and I want no part of it. What can we do in order to help ourselves and equip ourselves in order to love and lead them in a way that teaches them how to love and lead themselves before they leave home? That's the whole point of everything that I do. Love and lead your daughter in a way that teaches them how to love and lead themselves before they leave home. Because I was just reading in psychology this morning, and there was this great study that came out talking about how adolescents, going from late adolescence to early adulthood, there is this huge breakdown happening right now. And it is resulting in anxiety, depression, overwhelm, and anxiety, depression, and overwhelm. There's one I'm forgetting. But anyway, and my point is that they were saying it's because they are getting to this point at the end of childhood, and then they're put into this, you're 18, you're an adult. Again, that's that normal culture, right? There's no magic day, that someone is old enough or okay enough to then be an adult. It's not a switch. It has to be gradually put in throughout that second half of childhood. And these kids are then going into adulthood. They don't know how to take responsibility for themselves. They don't even know like physically what to do. How do I even do these things? How do I think in a way that makes me responsible for this? And they get so overwhelmed and then they break. And then that's the way that they're starting their adulthood, which is the worst way that you could. So if we can go from parent-led discipline, which is what they are when they come into our homes, right? They're parent-led, whether that is being born into our homes, adopting, whatever that is, whatever that mode is, to a place of self-disciplined leadership of themselves before they leave home. That is key. And then we're setting them up for a life of success.
So I would really love to get to what you mentioned in there, which is how to love themselves, how to lead themselves, right? And basically not creating more maybe this codependent relationship where the parent does everything for the kid, and basically the kid is like, well, I can't really do life without my parent, because I think we can do that. We can go down that rabbit hole as well. But
right,
I want to pose this question to you, and then I want to reflect as you think about it. So my question is exactly that: what are the best ways that we can help our kids love themselves, lead themselves, right? But then the reflection that I have for you is I too can't stand the norm. My wife and I were just talking about this because we've got two teenagers, and they're actually, I have very little complaints with the boys. They're not into drugs. They're not into alcohol. This is right at the sweet spot age where everybody, the kids are doing like smoking weed vapes in the school bathrooms right now. It's crazy right now, right? And a lot of people are just being like, oh, they're teenagers, they're experimenting. I'm like, screw that. No.
Right.
Okay. Like I understand experimentation, but don't normalize it, right? Don't normalize it. And I had a great guest on the podcast not too long ago. He was also one of our keynote speakers at our Dad Edge Summit. His name is Matt Bordeaux. He's been in education for years, for decades. And one of the things that he says was that the term teenager, I think, was actually formulated in the 1950s, right? And it was like this way of stereotyping kids and their crazy behavior, right? And some of the things they were doing, like, oh, they're just typical teenagers. And he's like, and he even said this during the speaking. He said, I don't want fine. When someone asks like, how are my kids? Fine? No. And how am I? Fine? No. I don't want to be fine. I don't want my kids to be fine. I want us to be extraordinary. Yeah. Right. And the same goes for normalizing really ridiculous, stupid behavior and just sloughing it off as like, oh, they're just teenagers. That's not fine. Right. I had one other guest, and he's a good friend of mine. He's also a coach of mine, and he's from New Zealand. And he said this quote to me that I use with the boys all the time. And it's not to be, we are better than everybody else, but it's a way to really implement this idea in your operating system. And I'll do my best New Zealand voice, but he's like, dare to be the stallion among the donkeys. Right?
Oh, yes. I love that.
Yeah, yes. I do too. And really and I say that to my kids all the time. I was like, dare to be a stallion among the donkeys and dare to be a lion among the sheep. And you're going to see your flock of friends do some really dumb stuff, and dare to be that stallion who operates differently. The stallion runs faster. He operates different. He works harder. He's different than the donkey. And that's for good reason. And that really hits my kids in the heart. They're like, oh man, I like that. Like, I'm going to be the stallion among the donkeys. But going back to the how, right? How do we lead our kids to lead themselves and love themselves? What have you found that parents can do that it's really effective?
Oh, goodness. And so, leading into that, a good segue from what you were just saying too, one of the sayings that we have in our house and we teach a lot is discipline yourself so others don't have to. And we say that a lot. And so, but beyond saying that, it's like, okay, well, what does disciplining yourself look like in this moment, in this situation, right? And so I think one of the biggest things that you have to put down is the power struggles. And so as soon as you are engaged in a power struggle with your kid, then you are locked in and there's a loss there, right? And so I always say, drop the rope and pull up a chair. Because if you're both pulling on this thing, You're both exerting so much emotional, maybe even, mental and who knows, physical strength. I don't know. But you're exerting strength that's going nowhere. And you're just both going to lose. And so drop the rope, pull up a chair, be calm whenever you are talking with them. You cannot talk to someone, especially your child, if you are all emotionally angsty about everything happening, right? And if you need to take a break and say, you know what, right now, I'm way too charged up to talk to you about this, and I don't want to say or do anything that wouldn't be in line with my integrity. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break here. I'm going to go on a walk, or I'm going to go do whatever. And we're going to talk in 20 minutes or in 3 hours, whatever that is. We're going to come back to this, but I want to be calm so I can be clear-headed to hear you out and hear exactly where you're coming from. And I want you to hear me out too. So vulnerability is really the key, one of the keys, but one of the biggest ones that you have to use as a parent raising a teen today. You have to be able to be vulnerable and share what is going on inside of your heart and head so that they know that they can share what's going on in their heart and head. If you come at it like a bull in a china shop and you're just raging everywhere, they're not going to feel like they can share anything with you. And if they can't share anything with you, who are they going to share it with? Some friend at school that they just met, or maybe that they've even known for a long time, but you don't know what kind of advice or guidance that they're giving them. So if not you, then who? And if it's going to be you, then you have to show up in a way that breeds open communication between you. A family is a team. Parents are the captains, but it's still a team. And on a team, you have to take care of one another, because if one of you goes down, everybody goes down. Everybody loses. And so having that vulnerability when they come home from school, and we call the F word, or we call fine the F word, no, we're not using that, no. And because you could say fine to anything. Fine isn't, oh, look at that fine, whatever, and it'd be really great, or fine, and it'd be really bad. So there's no description in there whatsoever. But anyway, when they come home and maybe you've had a hard day, and you can say, oh, how are you, Mom? Or how are you, Dad? Actually, I've had kind of a hard day today. I had a client that was, just not doing very well and wasn't listening to me very well. And it was just really hard. And we were walking through some hard things together. So I'm feeling a little bit, down, or I'm feeling a little bit drained, right? And then it gives them an opportunity to be able to open up too and tell you what's going on. If you can open up, it gives them permission to open up, because whatever you do, they'll be able to know they have permission to do as well, unless you tell them that they don't.
Yeah, I love the vulnerability of going first. What advice do you have for us guys who don't like to show that? Now, and let me preface that with, I've been doing this work now for 7 years, so I do know the power and authenticity and vulnerability, and even the one to go first. We always tell guys in our community, like, if you really want to, have some depth to your friendships and even to some of your acquaintances, you got to be the one to be authentic first, because the other guy probably is not going to do it. And when I say authentic, I don't mean like this, what you're probably thinking of is like highly emotional, like weeping sponge. You're being real, right? Like, you're being real about the good things and the things that are challenging you right now. But I think a lot of us, even me included, as you're saying this, I'm like, wow, I need to be more authentic with my kids, because if I let them in on the fact that I didn't have, the greatest day, God bless, you're really teaching me some lessons here, Nellie. I'm not even kidding. Like, I always talk about within marriage, don't, and with your kids, ask them questions where they can't answer with fine or good, right? Or busy, right? Or crazy or whatever. Yet when my kids can read me like a book and they're like, hey, are you doing okay? Yep, I'm fine. Are you sure? Because you look like there's something on your mind. Nope, I'm good. And in my mind, I'm like, they don't want to hear this. And that's the story I tell myself, which is totally bogus. And the other story I tell myself is, I don't want to come across as their dad doesn't have this handled, or their dad can't take, this or that. Like, I want them to know that I'm good, right? And what I'm really doing is I'm telling them, not only am I not good, but I'm not even good at telling you what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
And what we're also doing there too is not even giving them the opportunity to speak truth into us. And especially our teens, and honestly, even our smaller kids too, but especially our teens, they have a lot of wisdom that they can partake or they can use and help us with. So we go on walks every day in our family, and there's so many times that on those walks, that's kind of our family debrief time. It's almost a 2-mile walk, and that's when we do it. And it's our family debrief because everyone's kind of going through and oh, this happened today. Oh, this happened today, But when I'm talking about my day and either I'm having something personal, happening or, sometimes we just have off days, you just have an off day. I'm not feeling it today. I just want to, huddle under a blanket today, or something actually did happen that day. There's been so many times that my kids, all 4 of them, at different times, have spoken wisdom into helping me or helping me with other people as well, with just giving me a different perspective, which that's another huge piece of the work I do is perspective work. Because all of us throughout our entire lives have been building this one long lens. And that is a culmination of all the little lenses put into it. This happened when I was 5, so that's a lens. This happened, at 11, this is a lens. And it makes us view the world in different ways. So if we can then take our experiences and how we're feeling and being open and vulnerable and honest with that, and ask what other people's perspectives of that would be, it can speak so much wisdom into us and help us. And it gives them an opportunity to feel valued and worthy of helping us as well, which there's 5 major needs that every person on this planet has. And when you're a teenager and your brain is all under construction, they're even more so because they literally have live wires in their prefrontal cortex right then. And that is to be seen and heard, loved, belong, and have a purpose. And when we can feed those into them and teach them how to find them out in the world and within themselves, then we are breeding a great foundation of worthiness and esteem and confidence for them. But one of those ways is being vulnerable and having them speak wisdom into us through our stories.
Putting them in the driver's seat when it comes to
Yes.
reflecting back. Yeah, give them good practice. I like that. You mentioned in there too, self-love.
Mm-hmm.
And, just when I think my life is difficult, this is a joke, by the way. Just when I think my life is difficult, I think, man, but I could have a daughter. Right. And I only say that because that's on me. That's not on the daughter, because my wife, Jessica, always tells me, she's like, oh my God, it's probably a blessing we didn't have a daughter because she might hate you because I would be very overprotective, number one.
Mm-hmm.
But number 2, my boys, I've heard the self-love thing is such a challenge right now with daughters when it comes to like social media and what they're seeing and stuff like that. And I haven't really experienced that too much with boys, other than like my 14-year-old, he's really into fitness and he likes to work out, and he aesthetically is a well-built young man. But I also see him like, he doesn't have any social media, but we give him a little bit of time every day to go through TikTok, but not much time. But the ones he does, he always follows like these fitness people.
Right.
And so I see him like doing like some self-comparison. Sometimes he's like, Dad, I need to get my lats a little bigger. He's like, Dad, I need to get my quads a little bigger. So things like that just kind of come up.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily, I don't see his behavior to the degree that I see, like that I hear about girls, and they go on Instagram and they see like all these models and like these flawless filtered pictures, and they have a hard time with image issues and that kind of thing. What's been your experience with that?
Oh, gosh. I mean, 900%. Absolutely. And working with different families, every family has their different boundaries or lack of boundaries as well, right? I've worked with some families that are like, nope, no social media while you're under this roof, and it's my personal view on that. I love boundaries around it, because if you, and I've seen this before, and this is why I use this, is if they have no access to any social media while they are at home, when they leave home, they will have all the candy in the candy store and just, gorge themselves and not have a single clue how to have a good boundary around that. And everything will fall on them as far as comparison and perfectionism and all the things. And it can be really detrimental. So teaching them, the second half of childhood especially is a training zone for life. And you are the guide as the parent, you're the architect. And we go from first half of childhood, build life for them, to second half, build life with them. And then they're going off into the world. And with that, with social media, it's important to have boundaries around there. What are you looking at today? What did you learn today? Having open conversations, open accounts, right? There's no private accounts or anything like that the parents don't have eyes into as well. Why? Because, and, I've heard the, excuse or whatever that, they need their privacy. No, they don't. Your 16-year-old does not need, privacy from you for the world, right? They're showing everything to the world, but they don't want you to see. I don't believe that is a very healthy balance in the family and for that child. But especially with young women. But when they are in there, phones are up by 6 o'clock in our house, and you don't have phone time after 6. Why? Because you don't need all of that junk in your head before, you go to bed and when it's family time and all of that. And then you don't need it first thing in the morning when you wake up and it's next to your bed either. You can, so 11 to 6 in our house, that's how we work it. And not to say they have from 11 to 6. It's just those are the hours that you can use it. Now, with them going to school, some of them take their phone to school, especially my driver, for obvious reasons. But then she's at school and she can't use it. So boundaries are definitely key, because comparison out there today is so overwhelming. I just this morning was posting something in my parents group, and it was about how, I think it said there was a stat that came out from Pew's Diagnostic, and they were saying that 31% of young women say that they are overwhelmed with by comparison on social media. And I would argue to say that number is astronomically higher than 31%, because our young women are getting so overwhelmed while they're in social media that it bleeds out into all the world when they're outside of social media. But are they ever truly outside of social media if everyone around them is using it at different times and everyone's talking about it and doing all that too? My point is that they don't understand the deviation away from overwhelm, and their whole life just feels like overwhelm. And so they wouldn't be able to say, oh, that thing overwhelms me, because they're always feeling overwhelmed by it. And I sat down with a group of young women that were between 13 and 18 last summer, and we had some really good discussions surrounding this. And what I found was that these young women that were able to have their phone 24/7 access wanted their parents to take it away. And these were the popular kids, the ones that you would, oh, they're always on their phone, whatever, and they are. And they said it's so exhausting to live under this constant alert of notifications. And they always feel like they have to be on, no matter if it's 9 a.m. or midnight. And we were talking about, do you have boundaries? If you have boundaries. And this particular group that I was talking to said, we don't, but gosh, I wish we did. It would feel so good to have somebody else take away that for a while, because they don't necessarily, in that under construction brain, have the capacity to create that boundary for themselves. That go first, they follow. They need someone else to create that for them.
Incredible advice. So let's take your typical family, right? We have screen time with our 2 older boys and their phones. So screen time meaning they only get so much time on, so for instance, they only have 60 minutes of time outside of using texting or actually using the thing as a phone,
Mm-hmm.
and everything else will shut down. So, and they actually have to go in and request if they want more time for something. And then of course they have to come to us and give us the reason why.
Sure.
So we've created some pretty cool boundaries, but taking this a step forward, I just got emailed from a company called Arrow. I think it's Arrow. It's ARO. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's pretty fascinating. I don't know much about it. I literally just got the thing in the mail because they want to come on the show and talk about this. It's basically a box, but it's a charging station for all your devices. And I think what it does, and don't quote me on this because I don't know for sure. I haven't opened it up yet, but I know there's an app that goes with it. And basically what it does is when you put the phone in the box, and number one, it'll charge. I don't know if it locks, but there might be a lock to it. But basically the app tracks how much time it's in that box, and you are basically device free. And then how much time you have it, and what it does, and it incentivizes you to create more time without it. It's like, hey, go put your stuff in the RO box, which is kind of a cool concept. And again, I don't know much about it, but the question I have for you is, let's take a typical family where the teenagers have, I would say, let's call it 70+% access to their device, right? On a 24-hour day, right? It's my kids, our boys have to turn in their devices at 10 p.m. They're really not on it though, in between the hours of like 6 to 10 when they're home, but they kind of have access to it, but it's not like they're in their rooms locked up scrolling through aimless stuff because they're probably out of screen time anyway.
Right.
But they have to turn it in. But I'm curious, and they even push back on us. They're like, why do we got to turn in our phones? I'm like, well, it's the rule of the house. So take a typical American family. Perhaps they have no boundaries, and they love hearing this podcast, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. 11 to 6. If I could only do that, that would be great. But the question on parents' mind is, how do I go have that conversation? It doesn't go over like a turd and a punch bowl at a party.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest?
Well, like I was saying before, it's everybody. And if you can, so my husband and I, we both work from home. We need our phones sometimes for work. And so at 9 o'clock, my husband and I, if need be, if something arises, we can get our phones back out. But from 6 to 9, that is family time. And the kids, they're, off getting ready for bed, reading, homework, whatever at 9 o'clock anyway. So just letting them know we're doing this together, right? As a team, we are doing this together because we want as your parents, we want to be able to focus more on one another and also just seeing the world, like go outside or play a game, go shoot some hoops, go do something, like experience life instead of watching other people experience life, right? And I don't know if you've seen the movie Ready Player One. Have you seen that?
No, but I started watching it. So I've gotten through like the first 30 minutes, but everyone is always like, oh, dude, that's a scary movie if you're a parent trying to raise young people in this world right now.
So much so. And honestly, the day that Zuckerberg announced the metaverse, I was so sullen that day because I was like, here we go. And I was like, it'll just never be the same. And it's taking a little slower than I think he'd like, but know that it's coming, right? Where our kids are going to be able to, be 10 different things throughout the day. Identity shifting. If we don't help them solidify identity now, then it's going to go even more haywire later on. So we watched Ready Player One as a family, and when we had some really rich discussions about that. And then there's the name is escaping me right now on Netflix. There's the digital documentary that is on there as well. Watching it as a family and having those open conversations. So it's not finger pointing, right? And it's not, we're doing this because you did something wrong. It's not just on them, right? It's a whole family movement that you're doing together. Again, the family is a team. So that is how I would approach it, hands down, whenever you're making any sort of big change in the family, and especially when it comes to social media, because it will, and hear them out, right? Remember, they need to be seen and heard as your kids. And maybe you come at it and you say 11 to 6, and then they're like, well, I would like it to be until 8 for these reasons, right? And if they're valid reasons, they're presented with dignity and with respect, hear them out, maybe change it. But if they come at you and they're like, no, and they're all, throwing the fit that, you would see a little kid do, remember, discipline yourself so others don't have to, right? If they come at you like that, then you're firm. This is what we're doing. And you're obviously, having some immaturity battles right now. And so this is the way it's going to be until you can come and present a plan with dignity and respect that is well thought out and will hear you out. So that's how I would approach it as a family.
What were some of the questions that came up and the conversations that came up after you watching? I think is it the social experiment?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So what were some of the questions and conversations that came up after you watched Ready Player One as a family in the social experiment?
It wasn't necessarily questions, more of, oh my goodness. Like with the social experiment one, it was, they know everything that I do. I was like, of course they do. That's why you put something into your search and then you have 95 ads for it, in the next 20 minutes. And my husband actually works in IT. And so he's able to explain some of those things to them as well. And so that was just eye-opening to them. And also this whole cancel culture thing that you see, this is why it's important to share some, have those conversations about news that's happening today. There's some, I remember this one case of a young woman that she was completely canceled as an adult for something that she had posted a picture of 7 years earlier. And it was just her and her friends having fun at a party that was on a southern plantation. Like nothing was said or done, but she attended something like that. So 7 years ago. So that means today that, she is this, that, and the other. And so she's canceled. And so really bringing awareness to what are you putting out there? How do you feel like that could be perceived, when you do put it out there and other people's opinions? Are you bringing joy in life and goodness to people in what you're putting out there, or are you bringing something else, right? So having those conversations about what you post, and then also what you're looking at, how, even if you don't necessarily like or comment on something, but you pause on it, that is recorded somewhere. So that is something to keep in mind. And also knowing so many of our kids think, which I feel like Snapchat might be going down a little bit, but now there's like the Be Real and all these things. And nothing is ever, ever, ever erased. Nothing is ever truly erased. Everything can be brought back up again. And so that's something to keep in mind too. They were, so many kids were thinking it was safe, like, oh, this gets erased, quote unquote, after just 24 hours. Nothing is erased ever. And so, those are conversations to be had. And then with Ready Player One, it was a great time or a great discussion to have about this is where we are. And can you see that could be where we're going? That's not where any of us want to go, right? So what can we do today in order to get the tomorrow that we're looking for? So those are just, in our family, we mentor out in the community. We do that as a family too. We watch shows that deal with situations that we're not dealing with yet. But when you watch something and you have the discussion, you're having a discussion about an issue or a problem that isn't an issue or problem for you yet, but gives you allowance to have a talk about it. And that's what all of those are.
Can you repeat that quote you said, what we do today will, and you said something about tomorrow.
Yeah, what we do today will, I don't remember what I said, but basically what we do today will be our tomorrow. So what can we do today then to make our tomorrow what we want it to be?
Yeah, that was it. What can we do today to make our tomorrow what we want it?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I'm just jotting that down.
And yeah, we use that mentality all the time.
Yeah, this has been really, really cool. Just a couple of high level things here. We started this podcast with a statement before we hit record was taking the survival mode out of parenting. I want to wrap up the show with that quote because the audience didn't get to hear that. But when you said that, like my eyebrows just perked up because I was like, oh my gosh, is that ever one powerful statement? Because the majority of us are dealing with that mentality, of that survival mode. So how do we take the survival mode out of parenting?
Well, that's exactly what we do here. And going from surviving and doing, just going down this laundry list of, I think I'm doing the right thing. I don't know. Someone, Sally down the street did this, so I'll try it or whatever, to actually knowing that you're doing the right thing for your child. And that takes getting to know them. We just had a situation with one of my own daughters yesterday. And so first of all of your kids, you will have to parent differently. So just keep that in mind too. Every kid is different, which means you'll have to parent them differently. So don't think that, what you did for the oldest will work for the next oldest or the youngest or what have you. They're all different. And your relationship with them is different because they're different people. So it's okay to parent them differently as well. Fair is also an F word that's not allowed in our house.
We never hear that word in this house.
That's not fair. They did that. Well, that's a different situation, right? And anyway, so you have to know them. Here's the golden nugget of today is you have to know them in order to know what you're doing is the right thing for them. And in the teenage years, they're going to be different every Tuesday, probably more often than that, because they're developing so fast. Their psychology, their biology, right? The brain is under construction. Their bodies are going through so much, especially as a young woman, but also a young man. Their bodies and brains are changing. Their psychology is changing. The culture is changing at rapid pace. And you need to be able to look at all of these things, use all of these things in this compass and say, okay, so I need to know you right now. And so it's a constant conversation happening in your family. What are your interests? What did you do today? What did you like about today? What didn't you like about today? Right. And those are, of course, very elementary ways of saying it. But my point is always getting to know them as they are developing and growing so that okay, this is how they're feeling and how they're going to react and how they reacted, before. So I know what we need to do right now based on this data because I've gotten to know them right now. I'm not basing my data off of the cute little 6-year-old they were and our relationship that we had when, he or she was 9 or 10. I'm basing it off of who they are right now and our relationship that we have right now. So you will know that you absolutely know what to do when you know your child.
I love that. I use something kind of along those lines that when I see one of the boys doing something outside of what I know that they hold to be their integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking more about the older boys. The younger boys were, they're kind of getting that, but not yet. But the older boys in particular, and I remember the way I was brought up, a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt. How dare you? What's wrong with you? You can't feel that way. That type of talk, in my house. And so I don't do that. But what I do is like when and some just through conversation, like the boys will articulate something that, they know it's not right. And I'll be like, so what are your thoughts on that? Like, well, so-and-so is doing it and so-and-so is doing that. So, it seems like the norm. And I'll just simply say, I've known you for a little bit and I don't know if that's the norm for you, but you tell me, is that the norm for you? And then they'll just, you'll see them just kind of perk up and because I could tell them until I'm blue in the face, that's not how you operate. That's not how we operate. But when I just simply ask them, is that how you operate? And just real curious, right? And you'll see them just kind of come to life and be like, no, I don't. Okay, cool. So what would you do in that situation? And then we just kind of keep going with the conversation versus I love asking questions versus doing a lot of the telling. Like,
yes,
one of the things that I teach, and I'm not a parenting expert, but one of the things I hang my hat on that I've been trained in is conversational excellence. And, a lot of the guys are like, how do you lecture your boys? I was like, I really don't. I was like, what I do is ask really deep generative questions to get them to get to their own solutions versus the one I want to lecture them on. Like what is the past telling us? What is the present telling us? What would you need to do different? What have you learned? And what's your plan? That's more or less like the conversation. And they're doing 90% of the talking. But I have really, really enjoyed this. This has been really, really enlightening. And, you really taught me something here too. And I just want to share it with the audience. I mean, the audience knows how authentic and vulnerable I am because I always say I'm just a moron on a microphone learning from the experts. But I don't have many clashes with my boys. There's not, I mean, for people to be yelling in our house, it's not very often, especially with the older boys. We might raise our voices to get some attention if it's like totally distracted and they're not paying attention. But me and my 14-year-old, we kind of had like this argument. And it was about a week ago. And it was because he wasn't picking up after himself. And instead of owning it, his older brother like owned it. He's like, yep, totally did that. Yep. And here's what I'll do to be better. But yeah, you're right. I have nowhere to hide on that one. My dishes were everywhere. Trash was everywhere. Owned it. My 14-year-old just kept blaming and, pointing the finger. And I pointed this out to him. I was like, dude, just take ownership, man. Like, come on. And he was arguing and arguing. Well, I didn't do this. I didn't leave my dishes out. I didn't leave my popcorn bowls out. And I was like, wait, right here. Went down to his room and I handed him 2 bowls and a cup. And I'm like, just found this. And then he started arguing with me again. Well, then I started yelling back. And I don't really yell at him. And I could feel, it was almost like I could feel myself. I was like, this is not how I parent. And I'm so angry right now. And I have to get, and my fight or flight was telling me I have to do whatever it takes to get through this kid's head, even if it scares him a little bit. And I even didn't put my hands on him or anything like that, but my voice was raised and I could tell it was breaking him a little bit. Like he kind of got emotional and not cried, but I could tell there was tears in his eyes. And I wish I would have done what you just said to do in about 30 minutes ago. And that is, hey, I'm just going to take a break from this conversation right now because I'm getting pretty charged up and I don't want to say anything that I'm going to regret. And I don't want to raise my voice and operate outside of my integrity here. So I'm just going to take a break and let's reconvene to have this conversation in 60 minutes. And when you said it like that, I don't know what it was, but man, the light bulb just totally went off. And I was like, I wish I would have had Nellie on the podcast last week because I probably would have done something a little different. And moving forward, that strategy feels so good because when you're in the heat of the moment like that, you can't really think rationally. All you're thinking is, I just got to get this point out so this kid can hear me. Yeah. But I love that piece of advice. That's gold. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I come from a past too that we spoke in yelling a lot of times, growing up, and sarcasm was the language of the home. And so, I fight against those things on a regular basis. And that's what happens when we're raising them and the foundation is set, right? Anything that we learn as adults, then we need to use a jackhammer, and our natural reactions and tendencies are still to do those things. And then we have to say, hold on, nope, yeah. And so I'm trying to raise my daughters and help others raise their daughters where that is a part of the foundation. That is their innate reaction that they go to, right? So
yeah, that is so cool. Nellie, you're doing good work.
Oh, thank you very much. You are too.
I'm trying. I don't have 4 girls. I got 4 boys. I want to make sure that if any of the men, we actually have quite a few women that actually listen to this podcast, surprisingly, because I'll get emails and we get iTunes reviews and stuff like that from women. So for any of the parents out there that, they're just like, oh my gosh, I would really love to talk to somebody, or I would love to talk to Nellie more about this with my situation. What's the best way that they can find you and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to keep it simple. So my website has everything, just nellieharden.com. That's NellieHarden. So everything is on there. I have a great masterclass on there that's totally free. It's called the Daughter Decoder. And it's something I highly recommend. It builds out the framework and the questions you want to ask yourself in order to go from this hoping, and survival mode to knowing what you're doing is what needs to happen for your daughter and building with them instead of for them.
The daughter decoder.
Yeah.
When you said that, like the image that came to my mind is like when all these people in the 1800s were flocking to Alaska for the gold rush,
Yeah.
and it's like mining for gold. It's like, wait, the daughter decoder? I just need that. And I'm going to drop everything I'm doing and go get that.
Yeah. Yeah. I pictured the like decoder rings and like, oh, the treasures are unlocked. Yes. Okay. Now I know which way to go. Treasure map.
That is so cool. Well, gentlemen, you won't have to look far. You know me, you know our website, thedadedge.com. For this episode, you can go to thedadedge.com/Friday84. This is the last podcast of 2022. So if you're hearing this, that means get ready for a good weekend. It's New Year's Eve this weekend. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to ring in the new year. And I can't think of a better podcast or a better message to close out the year than what Nellie talked about us today. And that's decoding our daughters, decoding our teens, and all these beautiful things that you shared with us. And I also love the fact that you shared with us how to knock down these walls between us and our teenagers and how to overcome power struggles. And I love this team concept of a family, right? Hey, we're a team. The parents are the captains, we're the team. And of course, ending it off with how we can teach especially our daughters, how to love themselves, their self-image, despite everything that they see online. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Gentlemen, again, thedadedge.com/Friday84 for this show. Go out, live legendary. Let's have an amazing 2023. Take care, gentlemen.